Sergeant Michael O'Connell, a young 21-year-old American soldier, promised his wife Sophia and their little daughter Luna that he would come home safe from the war in Afghanistan. But he never did. He was declared killed in action, missing in a brutal ambush from which supposedly no one survived, and his body was never found. For the Army, he was just another casualty in a distant war. For Sophia, the absence of a body became torture, a 9-year vigil clinging to an almost extinct hope that consumed her life. The world moved on, the case went cold, and Michael's story became a distant echo. Until one sleepless night, while aimlessly scrolling on her phone, an Instagram profile with an impossible photo changed everything. The image not only revealed that the man she loved was alive, but that he had built a new life upon the ashes of hers, unleashing a truth far more complex and painful than the war itself. And what happened at the end of this story, well, you'll want to see it for yourself. But before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The memory of that farewell was still as vivid in Sophia's mind as if it had been yesterday. Michael, in his spotless uniform, and with that smile that always managed to calm her, knelt down to hug a little 4-year-old Luna. "I'll be back before you know it, my princess," he told her. He gave Sophia one last kiss, a kiss full of promises, and of the future they had planned together since they were high school sweethearts. A future that vanished weeks later with the arrival of 2 officers at her door, bearers of a telegram and cold, rehearsed words about honor, sacrifice, and an ambush in a remote valley. The official report was devastating and confusing. Michael's platoon had been attacked. A massive explosion, followed by intense fighting. No confirmed survivors. Some bodies were recovered, but Sergeant O'Connell's was not among them. Presumed dead, case closed. But Sophia never closed it. The absence of a grave became the anchor of her denial. She devoted herself body and soul to raising Luna, filling her father's absence with stories of his heroism and unconditional love, while secretly, every night, she searched, prayed, and hoped. That night, like so many others, insomnia led her to the blue glow of her phone. It was a form of escape, a portal into other people's lives, lives not frozen in time like hers. Her fingers slid aimlessly across the screen, until Instagram's algorithm, in its infinite and impersonal wisdom, suggested a profile, Puntomato Williams. The name meant nothing, but the profile picture, a sunny portrait of a blonde woman, caught her attention. She opened the profile. The bio was simple: nurse, mom of Oliver, London, UK. The first photo was of a little boy blowing out candles on a cake. The second, a landscape of the English countryside. The third made Sophia's world stop. The image showed the same blonde woman, Emma, smiling at the camera, with an arm around her and a smile she would recognize in any life, in any world. Next to her was a man, older now, with fine lines around his eyes, but it was him. It was Michael, and in his arms he was holding the boy from the birthday cake photo. The phone almost slipped from her trembling hands. A gasp caught in her throat, and she covered her mouth not to wake Luna. She zoomed in on the photo, her eyes scanning every pixel, looking for a flaw, an explanation, but there was no mistake. It was his jawline, his eyes, the exact shape of his smile. With her heart pounding in her ears, she read the caption posted just hours before. The words burned on the screen, branding a new and terrible reality. "Another perfect weekend with Liam and our little Oliver." Sophia stared at the screen, the air escaping from her lungs. The man she had mourned for 9 years was not only alive, but living happily with another family, in another country, with another name. She whispered that last word, a question that challenged everything. Liam. The word echoed in the silent room. Liam was not a name, it was an erasure, a rubber eraser that in an instant had wiped away 9 years of mourning, of memories, of identity. Sophia's initial shock quickly transformed into a cold, steel-like resolve. She was not a widow, and that woman in the photo was not the new partner of a widower, she was the wife of her husband. With trembling hands, she knocked on her daughter's bedroom door. Luna, now 13, had grown up under the shadow of a heroic, absent father. "What's wrong, Mom?" she asked as she entered the room and saw her mother's pale face. Sophia said nothing, she just handed her the phone. Luna's eyes widened. Unlike her mother, she didn't feel pain, but an analytical curiosity. The kind of curiosity of a generation that grew up with the digital world in their hands. "Who is Liam Williams?" she asked, as her fingers flew across the keyboard. To understand the existence of that man, we must go back 9 years to the dust and chaos of a field hospital in Afghanistan. There, a soldier awoke in a sea of confusion. He didn't know his name. He didn't remember his face or the life he had before the explosion plunged him into darkness. His uniform was torn, his ID tag lost forever. When he tried to speak, a strange mix of accents came out of his mouth. Part American, part British, a phonetic puzzle that baffled everyone. His only anchor in that blurry reality was a young volunteer nurse from the UK, Emma Williams. At only 22, Emma was overwhelmed by the horrors of war, lonely and thousands of miles from home. Day after day, she cared for the nameless soldier, and in the vulnerability of both, a bond was born. She fell in love with his quiet strength. He clung to her kindness like a castaway to a plank. In the bureaucratic chaos of the war zone, identifying him proved impossible. He was a ghost. And Emma, terrified at the thought that bureaucracy would take him away and send him back to a life she didn't know, or worse, that he would die before being identified, made a decision. A lie born of fear and desperate love. "You were a volunteer," she whispered one day when he asked who he was. "British. You have no family. That's why you came. We met a few weeks ago. We had something here." The lie was simple, but in his empty mind, it became the only truth. Back in present-day Texas, that lie was crumbling thousands of miles away. Luna, with a digital skill that amazed Sophia, began pulling the thread. Liam Williams, 40 years old, founder and CEO of Williams Innovations, a logistics company in London, she read out loud as her fingers flew across the keyboard. They found articles about his success, business profiles, but almost nothing personal. He was a man who, despite his success, seemed to fiercely protect his privacy. With this new information, Sophia did what she thought was right. She contacted the U.S. Army liaison again, the same one who, years ago, had offered her condolences. With a trembling voice full of emotion, she explained what she had found: the photos, the name, the company in London. The response on the other end of the line was a cold blow. "Mrs. O'Connell," the officer said, with condescending patience, "we understand your pain, but it has been 9 years. Cases of extraordinary resemblance are tragic, but they happen. Sergeant O'Connell was declared killed in action. We respectfully suggest that you accept the closure of the case for your own peace of mind." The call ended. Sophia was left with the phone in her hand, feeling a rage she had not experienced in years. The very system her husband had served was abandoning her once again. They had called her a widow. They had called her delusional. But now she knew the truth. She wasn't crazy, and if no one was going to help her, she would find the answers herself. She sat in front of her computer, the screen lighting up her determined face. She opened the website of an airline. Luna watched her silently, understanding that something had changed forever. With just a few clicks, the confirmation email arrived. Subject: your flight to London. Destination: LHR. Ticket type: one way. The hunt had begun. Heathrow Airport welcomed Sophia with a gray sky and a maze of impersonal hallways. The air was cold, damp, and the sounds around her, a murmur of British accents, felt strange and distant. Every face in the crowd was a reminder of her loneliness. She was in his country, in his city, but she felt like an intruder on an alien planet. After picking up a modest rental car, she sat behind the wheel, gripping it as if it were her only lifeline in this ocean of asphalt. The mission, which for 9 years had been a silent prayer, now had a map and a destination. As Sophia plunged into the dense traffic of London, just a few kilometers away, in a cozy house in the Richmond neighborhood of Emma Williams, life unfolded with a deceptive calm. Her 2-year-old son Oliver stacked building blocks on the living room carpet while she prepared a cup of tea. The house smelled of toast and the domestic happiness she had so carefully built. She turned on the television to catch the morning news,
a background noise for her routine. But the routine shattered when the screen showed a report about a new memorial honoring British and Allied soldiers fallen in Afghanistan. Her teacup froze halfway to her lips. Her breath caught. She saw the archival images, the uniforms, the desert landscape, and for an instant the icy panic that always lurked inside her threatened to overflow. With a sharp, almost violent movement, she grabbed the remote and switched the channel to a cartoon program. Oliver didn't even notice, but Emma stood in the middle of the living room, her heart racing. She loved Liam with all her being, but she knew her perfect life was built on a minefield, and every day she feared taking the wrong step that would blow everything apart. She didn't know that at that very moment, on the other side of the city, a woman had already lit the fuse. Sophia spent her first day in London like a strategist, not a tourist. With the name of the company Luna had given her, Williams Innovations, she drove to the financial district. The building was a tower of glass and steel, rising imposingly, a monument to the success of the man she remembered as a young soldier. She settled into a small cafe across the street, a vantage point from which she studied the entrance for hours. She watched executives come and go, feeling increasingly intimidated. Michael was not only alive, he had thrived in a world completely alien to her. The day passed without him appearing. Frustrated but not defeated, Sophia returned the next day. This time, she had a plan. She saw a group of young employees step outside for a smoke. She chose one who seemed friendly and approached him with a rehearsed smile. "Excuse me, this is going to sound very strange. I'm an old college friend of Liam Williams. I'm passing through the city and wanted to surprise him, but it seems he's never here." The young man, flattered by the attention, smiled. "Ah, the boss. No, he almost never comes to headquarters. He has his own home office. He's more productive there. A genius, that man." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. "Wow, I didn't know that." The young man, eager to be helpful, added, "Yes, he lives in Richmond, a beautiful area. I don't have the exact address, of course, but he runs the main operation from there." That was all she needed. She thanked him warmly and walked away before he could ask her anything else. Back in the safety of her car, Sophia felt triumph mixed with terror. Richmond, the name of the area. With that and the full name of the company, Luna would have no trouble finding the exact address through online business records. A few hours later, her daughter's message arrived, with an address and a Google Maps link. She entered it into her phone's GPS. The robotic voice announced the distance, 12 kilometers. 9 years of searching, reduced to a 30-minute drive. Her hands trembled as she stared at the blue line snaking across the screen, a path that would take her straight into the heart of the fire. Her finger hovered over the start button. Was she really ready to see what lay at the end of that road? Sophia pressed start on her phone's screen. A female voice with a British accent began dictating instructions, guiding her through the streets of London. Every turn, every roundabout brought her closer to a destination that had haunted her mind for almost a decade. The 30-minute drive felt like an eternity, and at the same time, like an instant. Her heart was a drum pounding against her ribs, a symphony of fear, hope, and a fury she dared not name. She wondered what she would do, what she would say. Would she scream? Would she cry? Or would she just stand there, a ghost from a life he had completely forgotten? The GPS guided her into Richmond, a dreamlike neighborhood with elegant houses and meticulously kept gardens. The robotic voice announced, "You have arrived at your destination." Sophia stopped the car at the end of the street, where she could watch the house without being seen. It was a 2-story red brick house with large windows and a deep blue front door. It was beautiful. It was the kind of house she and Michael had once dreamed of having in Texas. A knot formed in her throat. He had not only survived, he had lived the dream they were supposed to build together. She parked and turned off the engine. The silence in the car was absolute, broken only by her ragged breathing. And then, through the wooden fence that surrounded the backyard, she saw them.
The scene was so idyllically normal that it was brutal. A little boy, Oliver, ran across the perfectly trimmed lawn, chasing a soccer ball.
And behind him, gently nudging it with his foot, was Michael, Liam. He wore a simple t-shirt and jeans, and his laughter, a laughter Sophia had not heard in 9 years, floated through the evening air. It was the same deep, genuine laugh she remembered. The sound hit her like a wave, leaving her breathless. She saw Emma step out of the house, carrying a tray with glasses of lemonade. Michael walked up to her, wrapped an arm around her, and kissed her on the forehead. A casual, intimate gesture, full of a shared history that wasn't Sophia's. In that instant, Sophia's heart split in two. One part flooded with pure, overwhelming joy. He was alive, he was healthy, he was happy. The nightmare of imagining him dead in an Afghan ravine faded away, and immense relief washed over her. But the other part of her heart twisted with such sharp pain it stole her breath. The pain of betrayal, of jealousy, of seeing the life that should have been hers being lived by another woman. The hero she had mourned had become another's happy husband. Reality was infinitely crueler than uncertainty. She remained frozen there, a silent spectator to her own stolen life. She watched Michael lift Oliver into the air, the child laughing with delight. She saw Emma run her hand affectionately through her husband's hair. Every gesture of love was a dagger in Sophia's heart. Suddenly, Oliver kicked the ball too hard. It rolled across the lawn, passed through a hedge, and stopped on the sidewalk, a few meters from Sophia's car. Michael laughed and said something to Emma before walking toward the garden gate to fetch the ball. Sophia held her breath, straightened in her seat, her pulse hammering in her temples. He opened the small wooden gate and stepped onto the sidewalk. He was so close now she could see the lines etched around his eyes, the gray just beginning to show at his temples. He bent down, picked up the ball, and as he rose, his gaze swept across the street. For a second, his eyes landed on Sophia's car. The world stopped. Sophia felt as though her soul had left her body. He had seen her. He would recognize her. Her heart froze. Michael's smile faltered for the briefest moment. He frowned slightly, a shadow of puzzlement crossing his face. He tilted his head as if trying to focus on something that didn't quite fit, as if the anonymous car and the invisible woman inside it were a discordant note in the symphony of his perfect life. It was an echo, a ghost of a question he didn't know he had. Sophia instinctively shrank down in her seat, her body reacting before her mind. But just then, from the garden, Emma's voice called out, "Liam, darling, Oliver wants you to teach him how to score a goal." The spell broke. Michael blinked, shook his head as though clearing a cobweb, and with one last confused glance toward the car, turned and went back into the garden, closing the gate behind him. She sat motionless, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. He had almost seen her, and on his face, for that fleeting instant, she hadn't seen a stranger. She had seen a confused man, a man who had felt something. This discovery changed everything. It was no longer just about her pain or her need for answers. Now there was the risk that the past would collide with his present without any warning. She couldn't just drive away, but she also couldn't just walk up to that door. She was trapped in a vigil only a few meters from the truth, with no idea what her next step should be. Sophia spent the night awake in the austere room of her hotel. The image of Michael, of Liam, laughing in the garden, replayed in her mind like a looping film. Each repetition was a new torture. Yet, amid the pain, the memory of his confused expression when he had looked at her car gave her a new perspective. The blind fury she had felt began to fade, replaced with a cold, cutting question. What if he didn't know? What if he wasn't a traitor, but a victim? Like her, he had made a decision. She couldn't just show up at his doorstep. There was Oliver and there was Emma. She couldn't storm in like a hurricane and destroy their lives without being certain. She needed to confront him, but on neutral ground. She needed to look him in the eyes and get the answer to the only question that now mattered. Do you remember me? The next day, with her heart in her throat, she drove again to the imposing building of Williams Innovations. This time, she didn't stay at the cafe. She took a deep breath and crossed the glass doors, stepping into the world he had built. The lobby was a space of marble and steel, cold and minimalist. It felt a million miles from her warm home in Texas. With a calm she didn't feel at all, she approached the reception desk. The young receptionist looked up from her screen. "Good morning. Can I help you?" "Yes," Sophia said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I have an appointment with Mr. Williams. I'm a logistics supplier from the United States." The receptionist checked her digital calendar. "I don't see that here, but give me a moment." She picked up the phone. "Mr. Williams, sorry to interrupt. There's a U.S. supplier here to see you. She says it's about the new import contract." A pause. "Yes, sir. I'll tell her to come up." She hung up. The elevator at the end of the hall, the 32nd floor. The elevator ride was the longest of her life. When the doors opened, she found herself in an even more luxurious reception area. Seconds later, an office door opened, and there he was. It was him, dressed in a tailored suit that fit him perfectly, his hair shorter than she remembered. He looked at her, and for an instant, Sophia stopped breathing. He walked toward her, hand extended with a professional smile, though there was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. "Hello, I'm Liam Williams. Sorry, my assistant forgot to note our meeting. How can I help you?" Sophia ignored his outstretched hand. She couldn't touch him. Not yet. Her voice came out a trembling whisper. "What's your name?" He blinked, puzzled by the strange question. The smile slipped from his face. "Liam. Liam Williams. Isn't that who you're looking for?" "So, Liam is your name?" She pressed, her gaze locked on his, searching for any trace of a lie, any spark of recognition. "Yes, that's me," he replied, his confusion deepening. "I'm sorry, but who are you?" It was the moment of the truth, the moment that would decide everything. Sophia swallowed hard, the name she hadn't spoken out loud to a stranger in years forming on her lips. "Actually," she said, "I was looking for a sergeant, a Michael O'Connell." The name struck him visibly, not with the shock of recognition, but with the weight of a distant echo. He frowned deeply, his eyes narrowing as if searching the darkest corners of his mind. The name resonated with him, felt familiar, but he couldn't place the connection. "I'm sorry," he said, slowly, shaking his head. "I don't know anyone by that name." He paused, his gaze locking on hers again, now with a troubling intensity. "Forgive me, but I have a very strong feeling that I know you. I just don't remember from where. What's your name?" His own words, "someone I know but don't remember," seemed to surprise even him. The confusion on his face was so genuine, so painful, that Sophia had her answer. There was no betrayal in his eyes, only emptiness. He hadn't abandoned her. He had lost himself. Seeing the anguish in his face and feeling her own tears streaming freely down her cheeks, Michael, Liam, took a step toward her with instinctive concern. "Miss, did I say something wrong? Please." But Sophia couldn't bear it anymore. With her heart shattered, but with the terrible certainty she had come seeking, she simply shook her head and turned and ran. She ran down the hallway toward the elevator, fleeing from the gaze of a man who loved a stranger and felt nostalgia for a ghost. He stood there, in the middle of the reception area of his empire, utterly alone and more confused than ever. He watched the elevator doors close, hiding the woman who had brought a storm to his quiet soul. That night, as he sat across from Emma, he was unable to conceal his restlessness. Finally, he looked at her and asked the question that had been haunting his mind since the encounter at the office. A question that made Emma's blood freeze in her veins.
"Emma, have you ever felt as if you had lived an entirely different life?" The ride back home was silent torment for Michael. The face of that woman, her eyes filled with a pain that seemed familiar, and the name Michael O'Connell echoed in his head like a persistent refrain. That night, he asked Emma the question that had been haunting him. "Have you ever felt as if you had lived another life?" Emma, who was serving dinner, nearly dropped the plate. She managed to force a nervous laugh. "What are you saying, darling? You must be exhausted. It's been a very tough week at work." She tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, about Oliver, about their weekend plans, but Michael barely heard her. He felt disconnected, like a puzzle piece that didn't fit into its own picture. That night, he had one of his dreams. They were always the same, fragments of sensations, never clear images. The heat of a different sun, more intense than London's. The taste of spicy food that made him laugh through tears. The feeling of tiny hands clutching his finger. He always woke with an inexplicable sense of lost happiness. A happiness that contradicted the story he knew of himself, that of a solitary volunteer with no family. But this time, in the dream, for an instant, he saw a face. The face of the woman from the office. He awoke with his heart racing. The strategy of ignoring those ghosts no longer worked. While Michael struggled with the shards of a life he didn't remember, Sophia, in her lonely hotel room, was facing the painful truth that she did know. He hadn't abandoned her. Fate had stolen him, and a merciful lie had kept him away. The rage she had once felt had dissolved, leaving only deep love and immense compassion. She realized she could not simply burst into his life and claim him. He had a son. He had Emma, who, despite the deception, clearly loved and cared for him. Destroying his present happiness to reclaim a lost past felt cruel. But she couldn't leave him trapped in that golden cage of amnesia either. And above all, there was Luna. Her daughter had lived without a father for 9 years, believing he was a fallen hero. Now she knew he was alive, and Luna deserved the chance to meet him, if he so chose. With a resolution born from the deepest part of her love, Sophia made a decision. She would not fight to win him back for herself. She would fight to give him back to himself. She spent the rest of the day and much of the night in a solemn, heartbreaking ceremony. She took from her suitcase a small photo album she had brought with her. She spread the photos across the hotel bed as though they were sacred relics. There was their wedding, both of them so young and full of dreams. There was Michael holding a newborn Luna with tender clumsiness. There they were at a family picnic in Texas, under the blazing sun he seemed to long for in his dreams. Each photo was a happy memory, and now a dagger. Then she sat down to write the letter. It was the hardest thing she had ever done. She told him everything: who he was, who she was, the love they had shared, the family they had built. She told him about Luna, about how she had his eyes and his stubbornness. She explained how she had found him. And then she wrote the most generous and painful lie of all. "I'm fine, Michael. I've rebuilt my life. I am happy. I'm with someone who loves me. But you deserve to know the truth about who you are, and Luna deserves the chance to know her father someday. I ask for nothing. I only give you back your past. What you do with it is up to you." She left her phone number, specifying it was so Luna could speak with him if he wished. It was her last act of love, releasing him from any obligation or guilt toward her. The next morning, with eyes swollen from crying but her spirit at peace, she placed the photos and the letter into a plain cardboard box. She sealed it as though she were sealing a chapter of her life. She found a courier service and went to their office in central London. The clerk took the package indifferently, unaware he was holding the fragments of a broken life. "I need this delivered today," Sophia said firmly, "and it is crucial it be delivered personally, into the hands of Liam Williams only." As the courier nodded and loaded the box into the van, Sophia turned and walked toward the taxi stand without looking back. Her mission in London was over. She had found her husband and, in the same act, let him go forever. Now the truth was riding through the busy streets of London in a van, a time bomb with the name Michael O'Connell on the label. Michael, or Liam as he knew himself, spent the morning after the encounter in a fog. In his luxurious office overlooking London's skyline, market reports and financial forecasts seemed written in a foreign language. The face of the unknown woman and the name she had spoken, Michael O'Connell, were anchored in his mind. It was like the echo of a song he had never heard. He tried to blame it on stress, but his dreams, those sensations of a happiness that didn't belong to his present life, had grown more vivid since seeing her. He felt like a stranger in his own skin. That is when his personal assistant entered the office. "Mr. Williams, a package has arrived for you. The courier insists on handing it over personally. He won't leave it at reception." The strangeness of it shook him from his stupor. "Personally?" he repeated. He nodded, and moments later a courier handed him a plain cardboard box with no sender, only his name, Liam Williams, written in neat handwriting. Curiosity overcame his confusion. He carried the box to his desk, opened it with a cutter, and looked inside. The first thing he saw were old photographs, slightly faded with time. In the first, he saw himself, much younger, in a military uniform, smiling beside the woman from the lobby. Another photo showed them in a church, on their wedding day. In another, he was holding a newborn baby girl, gazing at her with a devotion that squeezed his chest. He saw the same little girl a bit older, at a picnic under a blazing sun, not England's sun. The images didn't bring back clear memories, but sharp jolts of raw emotion, unfiltered nostalgia for a life he had not known he had lived. Beneath the photos was a stack of letters tied with ribbon, and on top of them, a sealed envelope. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. He unfolded it and began to read. The first sentence struck him like lightning. "My dear Michael, your name is not Liam Williams. Your name is Michael O'Connell. You are a sergeant in the United States Army, or at least you were. You were born in Boston, moved to London with your parents, and later returned to the United States, to Texas, where we met in high school."
Each word was a brick falling away from the wall of his amnesia. As he read about the war, about the ambush, he felt a phantom pain in his shoulder. When he read about his home in Texas, he could almost smell the jasmine Sophia had planted in the garden. "We had a daughter, Michael, the girl in the photos. Her name is Luna. She is 13 years old now, and she has your eyes and your stubborn smile. For 9 years we mourned you, we waited for you, but the army declared you dead, and the world moved on, even though we couldn't." The flashes grew more intense. They were not visual memories, but pure sensations. The exact weight of a baby's head on his shoulder. The sound of a child's laughter echoing in a high-ceilinged room. The touch of a woman's hand entwined with his, a perfect fit he knew by heart. Without knowing why, he had to sit down. The dizziness threatened to knock him over. And then he reached the last paragraph, the one that would change everything. "I came to London because I needed to know the truth, and I found it. I saw you happy, and that, even if it breaks my soul, is all that matters. I am not writing to claim you, but to free you. I am happy, Michael. I have rebuilt my life. I'm with someone who loves me and takes care of me. I only wanted you to know who you are, for your own sake, and so that Luna, our Luna, has the chance to meet her father one day, if you want it. You have no obligation to us. Be free. With all the love we once shared, Sophia." At first, he felt a stab of something like jealousy. She had rebuilt her life. She was happy with someone else. But then he reread the sentence and understood. He saw her face in his memory, eyes flooded with tears in his office the day before. He saw the pain she had tried to hide and understood the magnitude of her sacrifice. The lie wasn't for her, it was for him. It wasn't a farewell, it was a release. The most selfless and cruel act of love he had ever known was returning his past to him at the cost of renouncing any future together. He remained there, sitting at the top of his London empire, with the proof of an entire life scattered across his desk. He was no longer Liam Williams, the self-made man. He was Michael O'Connell, a lost husband, an absent father, a ghost who had awakened to discover he had been haunting the wrong life. He picked up a photo of Luna, a bright-eyed girl who didn't know him, and for the first time in 9 years, he felt the unbearable weight of truth. He left his office not as Liam, the businessman, but as Michael, the soldier finally returning from war, heading home to face the woman he loved and who he now knew had been saving him and lying to him every day for 9 long years. Michael's journey back home was a passage through a landscape that suddenly felt foreign. The crowded streets of London, the city he believed was his, now seemed like the stage of someone else's life. The identity of Liam, the businessman, the self-made man, felt like a borrowed suit that no longer fit. He drove toward the woman he loved, the mother of his son, but a terrifying question pulsed in his mind with every mile. If he wasn't Liam, who was she really to him? Emma had always known this day could come. Fear was a silent companion who sat at her table every night. It wasn't in the chaos of Afghanistan where her lie felt the heaviest, but in the quiet normalcy of her life in London. Years later, one night while Michael slept, curiosity and guilt had driven her to the internet. She searched forums for families of missing soldiers. On one of them, an American forum, she found a post by a woman named Sophia Reyes, begging for any information about her husband, Sergeant Michael O'Connell, who had disappeared in the same ambush. And next to the text was a photo, their wedding photo. The air left Emma's lungs. She saw Liam, younger, smiling beside another woman. She saw the life he had once had. She read about his daughter Luna, the love Sophia felt for Michael, and she crashed into the devastating reality that her happiness was built on the pain of another family. For hours she cried in silence in front of the screen. Her heart divided. She could confess. She could try to find this woman and return her husband to her. But then she looked toward her bedroom, where Michael slept peacefully, free from the trauma of war. She looked at the crib where little Oliver breathed softly, and she made a selfish decision, one born of love and panic. She closed the laptop, buried the secret so deep in her soul that she almost convinced herself it had never existed. Until now. When Michael walked into the house that afternoon, she knew. It wasn't because of the box he carried in his hand, but because of the look in his eyes. The man who entered wasn't Liam. His Liam was a stranger with her husband's face, a ghost returned from the grave. He didn't shout. There were no accusations. His calm was far more terrifying. He walked to the coffee table in the living room where Oliver's building blocks lay scattered and placed the box down. He opened it slowly and pulled out a single photograph. He slid it across the polished wood until it stopped right in front of her. It was the photo of his wedding with Sophia. She looked at him with eyes filled with tears she had been holding back for years. His question was barely a whisper, but it thundered through the room. "Who am I, Emma?" And everything collapsed. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, her entire body shaking. "I'm so sorry, my love." And then the words poured out, a torrential confession that swept everything away in its path. She told him about the field hospital, about her loneliness and fear. She told him how she had fallen in love with him, with his quiet strength amid so much horror. She said, "I didn't know what to do. You were so lost, and I was so afraid of losing you." The lie just came out. It was easy in the middle of all that chaos. She confessed the night she discovered the truth, the night she saw the photo of Sophia and Luna. She admitted, "I saw her pain. I saw the life they had stolen from you, and I was a coward. I already loved you so much. We were a family. I couldn't destroy it all. I swear every day I thought of telling you, and every day the fear was stronger." He listened without interrupting. His face was a mask of immeasurable pain. There was no anger in his eyes, which was worse. There was a deep, devastating sadness. He understood her reasons. He understood her fear, her desperate love. In his place, would he have acted differently? Perhaps not, but understanding didn't change the fundamental truth. His life, his love, his son, everything had been born of a lie. The house he believed was his home had been built on sand. When Emma finished her confession, a heavy, suffocating silence filled the room. She looked at him, waiting for a verdict, a shout, anything, but he just looked at her, or rather, through her, as if he were seeing the ghosts of two overlapping lives. The love he felt for her was real. The love for his son was real. But the life they had shared, now he knew, it was a beautiful fiction. Emma moved closer, her hands trembling, daring to touch his arm. "Say something," she pleaded in a broken whisper. "Please, Liam, Michael, say something." He finally blinked, as if returning from a very distant place.
He looked at her, and in his eyes, Emma did not see the man she knew, but a stranger filled with a sorrow as vast as an ocean. And she knew, in that instant, that she had just lost him forever. The days that followed Emma's confession were a silent purgatory. The beautiful house in Richmond, which had once been a sanctuary of peace for Michael, became a prison of unbearable truths. He moved into the guest room, creating a physical distance that mirrored the abyss that now separated them. Emma drifted through the house like a shadow, her eyes swollen from crying, respecting his silence but terrified of it. There were no shouts, no reproaches, only a heavy, dense grief that seeped into everything. Michael felt fractured, a man split into two halves that could not coexist. By day, he tried to be Liam. He watched his little son Oliver playing in the garden and felt a surge of paternal love as real and solid as the walls surrounding them. Oliver was his son, and the love he felt for him was undeniable. He looked at Emma, the woman who had rescued him from the darkness, who had loved and cared for him for 9 years, and despite the lie, he felt the weight of their shared history, of the genuine bond they had forged. That life was tangible, warm, real. But at night, when the house fell silent, he became Michael again. He sat alone in the dark living room with Sophia's and Luna's photos scattered across the table. They were the ghosts of a stolen life, but they were his ghosts. He felt a sharp pain, an immense sorrow for the 9 years he had lost with his daughter, the first tooth he hadn't seen fall, the first day of school he hadn't attended, the birthdays he hadn't celebrated. He grieved for Sophia, imagining her lonely and tireless search, her relentless pain. This love, though spectral, was his root, his original truth. And in the midst of this internal war, he reached a surprising conclusion. He did not hate Emma. In his heart, he had already forgiven her. He understood that her lie had not been born of malice, but of fear and desperate love in an impossible situation. He forgave her, just as he forgave and admired Sophia for her final sacrifice, for freeing him with her own merciful lie. Forgiveness was not the problem. The problem went much deeper. He could not choose one love without betraying the other. He could not be Emma's husband without feeling he was abandoning Sophia's memory. He could not be Oliver's father without feeling he had failed Luna. He was paralyzed, broken between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. This paralysis lasted almost a week of silences, of averted glances, of unbearable tension. He knew he could not go on this way. He had to do something, take a step, any step, to escape that limbo. One night, while looking at a photo of Luna, a teenager he did not know, he made a decision. He could not go on living with the image of a ghost. He needed to know she was real. He needed to hear her voice. With trembling hands, he pulled Sophia's letter from the box. At the bottom of the page was the phone number, that portal to his other life.
He sat on the edge of the sofa, the phone heavy in his hand. He knew that by dialing that number, he would cross a threshold with no return. There would be no going back. The fiction of Liam Williams would die forever. He took a deep breath and dialed the digits one by one. The country code, the area code, a bridge of numbers crossing the Atlantic. He pressed the phone to his ear. He heard the international ringtone, a distant, strange sound that seemed to travel through time and space. One ring, 2, 3. His heart pounded so hard he feared it might burst from his chest. He was about to hang up, convinced this was madness. And then someone answered. It was not Sophia's voice he heard. It was a younger voice, clear but hesitant, the voice of a teenager. "Hello?" The air left Michael's lungs. It was her. It was Luna, the daughter he thought he had lost, the daughter he hadn't even known he had until a week ago. She was real. She was on the other end of the line, a world away. He wanted to say her name. He wanted to say, "It's me." He wanted to say, "I'm sorry." He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. He was mute, breathless, a man of two worlds suspended in the silence of a phone call that changed everything. On the other end of the line, across an ocean and 9 years of silence, Luna's voice waited. "Hello? Is someone there?" He was about to hang up. Michael struggled to find air, to form a word. "Luna," he finally managed to say, his voice hoarse, strange, the voice of a man who hadn't spoken his true name in a decade. There was a pause. "Who is this?" I'm your father, Luna. I'm Michael." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with disbelief and the story of a girl who had grown up with a ghost for a father. "My father is dead," she answered, her voice trembling, defensive. "This must be a cruel joke." "No, it's not a joke," Michael said, the words tumbling out. I never died, Luna. I lost my memory. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know you existed. I found out only a few days ago." The conversation that followed was a torrent of emotions, clumsy and heartbreaking. Luna, torn between skepticism and a hope she dared not to feel, asked him questions. She told him about her life in Texas, about her school, her friends. She spoke of Sophia, how her mother had never stopped searching for him, how each anniversary of his disappearance she lit a candle, refusing to accept his death. She told him how her mother had kept his memory alive, not as a sad ghost, but as a beloved hero. Every word from Luna was a nail in Michael's heart. He listened to the chronicle of the life he had missed, of the daughter he had not seen grow up. When they hung up, an hour later, he remained sitting in the darkness of the living room, trembling. The call had not brought him peace, but brutal clarity. Emma found him there, a broken silhouette in the shadows. She knew, without him saying a word, that he had made the call. "I spoke to her," he said in a hollow voice. "Her name is Luna." In that moment, Michael knew what he had to do. He was no longer paralyzed. The conversation with his daughter had shown him the raw truth. He could not merge his two worlds. To try would be the ultimate act of selfishness, one that would only create more pain. It was not a choice between Sophia and Emma, for he loved both in his own way. It was a choice between two lives, and both were irrevocably scarred by tragedy. He could not ask Emma and Oliver to live with the ghost of his past, and he could not ask Sophia and Luna to accept a man who had built an entire life upon his absence. The only fair solution, the only honorable way out, was the most painful. He had to demolish everything so they could build something new upon the ruins. The next morning, Emma watched as he dressed in Liam Williams' expensive suit for the last time. There was a new determination in his eyes, a tragic calm. "I'm going to sell my share of the company," he announced, his voice flat. "I'll make sure you and Oliver never have to worry about anything, and then I'll leave." Emma began to cry silently. She did not plead. She did not argue. Deep down, she had always known their happiness had an expiration date. That day, Michael O'Connell, acting under the name of Liam Williams, gathered his partners. The news of his sudden and inexplicable decision to sell his majority stake in Williams Innovations shocked the small world of London logistics. He offered no explanations, only instructions. His partners, confused but seeing an opportunity, quickly agreed. Calls to lawyers and accountants were made. The dismantling of Liam Williams' life had begun. It was a methodical, brutal abdication of everything he had built. As the legal machine turned, he explained it to Emma. It's not a divorce for lack of love, but a necessary amputation. Our love was real, Emma, but it was built on a lie that neither of us created, but one we both became victims of. I can't go on being Liam, and it wouldn't be fair to you if I tried to be Michael in this house. A few weeks later, he received the call from his lawyer. The sale was complete. The figure was astronomical. £7 million. He sat in his office, the same place where he had opened Sophia's box, and stared at the confirmation email from the bank.
The number glowed on the screen. He now had the means to begin any life he wanted, anywhere in the world. But the money felt cold, sterile. It was the price of his freedom. A freedom that left him utterly alone.
He had burned the ships of his present to honor a past he could not recover. Now he floated in an ocean of possibilities, without a port to call home. What does a man do who has everything, and at the same time, absolutely nothing? With £7 million in his bank account, Michael O'Connell was, on paper, a man who could buy anything in the world, but the one thing he longed for, the peace of an unfractured soul, was priceless. He settled into a temporary and sparsely furnished apartment in Manchester, a city where no one knew Liam Williams, and even less Michael O'Connell. In the solitude of those empty walls, he sat down to do the only thing left to him, rewrite the ending of the lives he had interrupted. He wrote 2 letters, the hardest of his life. To Emma, he wrote with a gratitude that ached in his chest. He thanked her for saving him in Afghanistan, for giving him 9 years of love, and above all, for giving him Oliver. He explained that his decision to leave was not a rejection of her love, but the painful acceptance that he was no longer the man she had fallen in love with. "I cannot go on being Liam," he wrote, "and it would not be fair for you to live with the ghost of Michael." To Sophia, he wrote with respect and an almost sacred reverence. He thanked her for her unwavering love, for her relentless search, and above all, for her incredible sacrifice in setting him free. He explained why he could not simply return. 9 years was an entire lifetime. He had changed, she had changed. To try to revive the past would only desecrate their memories and cause immense pain to everyone. "You gave me the truth," he concluded, "and now I give you the freedom you once gave me." Then, with the cold logic of a businessman, he executed his final plan. He opened his computer and in a series of impersonal transactions began distributing his fortune. £500,000 were transferred to Emma's account. Another $500,000 crossed the ocean to an account in Texas in Sophia Reyes's name. He created 2 trust funds, one for Oliver Williams and another for Luna O'Connell, each with £500,000, inaccessible until they turned 18. Finally, he established 2 generous, lifelong monthly pensions to ensure that both his children would live comfortable lives, the life he, as a father, felt obligated to give them. It was the only paternal language he had left, that of responsibility from a distance. The time for goodbyes came. He went to the house in Richmond one last time, knelt before Oliver, and hugged him tightly, inhaling the childish scent of his hair. "Daddy has to go on a long trip," he told him with a choking voice. "But always, always I will be your dad, and I will love you every day of my life." He handed Emma the letters and legal documents. Their farewell held no bitter tears, only the silent sadness of 2 people who had truly loved each other, but whose love had fallen victim to circumstances. "Take care, Emma," was all he could say. "You too, Michael," she replied, using his true name for the first and last time. Across the world in Texas, Sophia was in the kitchen of her small restaurant, barely staying afloat when her phone vibrated. It was a bank alert. Seeing the amount of the transfer, she thought it was a mistake, a fraud.
But minutes later, an international courier arrived with an envelope. Inside was Michael's letter. She read it right there, standing among the aroma of spices, and felt the hope she had carried for 9 years finally extinguish. She cried, not for the loss of a future, but for the final confirmation of a past that would never return. The money was no comfort, but it was closure, a full stop. A year later, Michael was in the office of his new company in Manchester. It was smaller, but successful. His life was a routine of work and loneliness. His phone rang. It was a video call. He answered. On the screen appeared 2 smiling faces. Luna, now 14, was in her room in Texas. Oliver, 3 years old, was in the living room of his house in London. Michael had connected the call, acting as the invisible bridge. "Look, Oliver," said Luna, showing a drawing to the phone's camera. "It's a rocket. Do you like it?" Oliver laughed, a pure, childlike laugh, and babbled something unintelligible in response. Luna smiled at him with the patience and affection of an older sister. Michael watched them, a sad but proud smile on his face. His 2 worlds, once irreconcilable, were now connected through his children. They were the legacy of his broken life and the only bridge uniting the fragments of his heart. He had lost his families, but he had ensured that his children would never lose each other. Several years later, the echoes of war and of a broken life had found a new and strange balance. The worlds Michael O'Connell had tried to keep apart now coexisted in a fragile and distant peace, united by the only bridges that survived the demolition: his children. Michael, true to his word, never again became Liam. He settled in Manchester and, with the same tenacity that had defined him as a soldier and an entrepreneur, built a new company from scratch, turning it into another multi-million-pound success. His life was one of solitary discipline. He briefly reconnected with the few relatives he had left in the United States who had mourned him as a fallen hero, but he maintained a respectful distance. His heart, fractured between 2 great loves, never sought a third. He remained single, a man who had once had everything, and who now found purpose only in his work and in his 2 children. Every month without fail, he flew to Texas to spend a few days with Luna, and every second weekend, he drove to London to simply be Oliver's dad. In London, Emma continued her life with quiet grace. She kept working as a respected nurse, finding comfort and vocation in caring for others. She raised a happy, healthy Oliver, a boy who knew his father lived in another city, but who loved him unconditionally and eagerly awaited his visits. Emma never blamed Michael. She understood they both had been swept away by a current they could not escape. She found her peace not in a new love, but in the stability she gave her son. In Texas, Sophia became a local legend. Her restaurant, Luna's, flourished, a vibrant corner of authentic Mexican food, a testament to her strength and resilience. She became the successful businesswoman she had always had the potential to be. Since Michael never started a new relationship, her love for him transformed into a bittersweet memory, and her energy poured into her daughter and the life she had built for herself. But the true miracle was not in their separate lives, but in the connection that had blossomed between them. Luna and Oliver, Michael's daughter and Liam's son, were not strangers separated by an ocean. They were siblings. Thanks to the video calls facilitated by their father and the annual visits he organized, they forged a strong and genuine bond. On a sunny summer day in a London park, we see Luna, now a young university student visiting, teaching Oliver, now a curious and talkative boy, how to throw a frisbee. Michael watched them from a bench, a melancholy but genuinely happy smile. It was not the traditional family he had dreamed with Sophia, nor the perfect family he had built with Emma. It was something new, something rebuilt, fragile but real. War does not only leave scars on battlefields. Its shockwaves travel through time, shattering futures and rewriting lives without asking permission. The story of Michael O'Connell is not one of a happy ending, but of emotional survival. Trapped between 2 lives, he made the only decision that would not destroy the people he loved. He sacrificed himself. He demolished his own happiness so the pieces could be used by others to rebuild. And in that act, he proved that although destiny can break promises and romantic love can fracture, the bond of a father with his children is a force capable of building bridges over the most desolate ruins, creating something new, something hopeful, something that endures. And if you enjoyed learning about this story, don't forget to subscribe to receive more content like this and updates about the cases. Also, leave your like and your opinion about the case in the comments. It helps the channel a lot. Thank you very much. And until next time.